Before we get started, just a heads up, this episode talks about relationship breakdown and mental health, including some references to suicide. If that's something you're navigating right now, please take care of yourself as you listen. There's a list of supports in the comment section and a support message at the end of this episode. You can always skip ahead if you need it. Welcome to Men's Wellbeing Conversations. I'm Jason Campbell, Men's Health and Wellbeing Coordinator here at Trobe University's Student Wellbeing Service. And today I want to talk about men and relationship breakdown. In my work with guys over the years, I've regularly seen the impact of relationship breakdown on young men. And it genuinely is a huge event in their lives. I remember this personally myself. The research is clear that this is one of the more significant mental health events a young man can go through, and one that we're not really given the tools to navigate well. So today, I want to spend about 10-15 minutes talking about what's actually happening for young men when a relationship ends, demystify it a little bit, and talk about how you can recover from something so impactful. Also, how do we support young men going through this difficult and sometimes risky time? We'll look at new research where a group of young guys have shared their own experiences and what they found actually helps, not what we think helps. And this may be surprising. This is Men's Wellbeing Conversations, Episode 1, Breaking Up. First, let's set the stakes because they're higher than most people realise. The research is clear. Breakups can carry real mental health consequences for young men. In fact, the end of intimate partner relationships are one of the leading risk factors for suicide in men. And we know 1/5 of suicides in men 24 and under occur in the 12 months after a breakup. And yet, for a long time, this hasn't gotten nearly the attention it deserves. Most studies had focused on guys navigating separation after divorce. And while this is important, the study was filling the gap on what men under 30 experience in non-marital intimate relationships. So I want to draw your attention to this important new research from Orygen, one of Australia's leading youth mental health organisations, where researchers sat down with 22 young men, all aged 19 to 30, all of whom had been through a breakup in the last 3 years. This study has explored in depth how young men experience relationship breakdown and how social support, or lack of it, can shape their recovery. I've heard many guys say, is what I'm experiencing normal? Unfortunately, there is no instruction book we're given on how to manage something so painful. I wish there was. Men are getting conflicting messages too on how to cope, or even if they should be feeling what they feel. The researchers looked at the question, how do young men react and recover from intimate partner relationship breakdowns? And I think this is important to look at. They talked in depth about what it felt like for the participants, how they reacted, coped, and what helped, and most importantly, what didn't. I want to walk through what a breakup looks like, and this is something you've probably experienced yourself, or unfortunately might be experiencing right now. On the reacting front, the honest answer is it's complicated. One of the things the researchers capture really well is just how many different things you can feel at once. You might well be devastated, feel shocked, feel numb, feel angry. This is a common one. Drained, a whole range of experiences as the relationship comes to an end. The sadness tends to sit at the center of it all, and that's grief. And layered into that are things like anxiety, guilt, and shame. Some men in the study described a real identity crisis. Their sense of who they were had become tied to the relationship itself, and losing it left them genuinely unsure of themselves or who they were. Others found themselves going over and over everything they felt they did wrong, caught in the loop of self-blame that can be really hard to get out of your head. Interestingly, the emotions were quite varied. Alongside that grief, some guys also felt sense of relief, freedom from something that had become stressful or difficult. And then came the confusion of trying to make sense of both those things existing at the same time. There's also something worth naming here around the role of masculine stereotypes and expectations we place upon ourselves as men. A lot of guys carry this unspoken expectation that they should be able to just shake a breakup off, that being deeply affected is somehow not okay. So on top of the actual heartbreak, there's this additional weight of packing away what you're really feeling and just move on. For some guys, all of those feelings can build to a point where it becomes genuinely overwhelming. The researchers described it as emotional flooding, where feelings become so intense they start shutting down day-to-day functioning. Some men describe feeling like their whole reality had been swallowed by what they were going through. Time felt distorted, basic things felt impossible. For some of the men in the study, this level of overwhelm tipped into thoughts of suicide, where the emotional pain reached a point where they genuinely questioned whether they wanted to continue living. The loss of the relationship felt indistinguishable from a loss of meaning and purpose altogether. Now, I know this is heavy, but it's also exactly why this research matters. When the emotional weight became hard to carry, men found different ways to manage it. 3 responses came up consistently across the study: withdrawing, distracting, and expressing, used in different combinations and at different times. With withdrawing, a lot of men pulled back from social life and people while they tried to figure out what they were feeling. There's a strong norm around men handling pain independently and not burdening others. But the researchers make an important distinction here. There's a difference between intentional withdrawal to reflect and isolation that compounds risk, especially when it's involuntary, like when friendship groups split and a guy suddenly finds himself with no support at all. Then there's distracting. When the pain became hard to sit with, men looked for ways to put some distance between themselves and what they were feeling. For a lot of guys, that meant throwing themselves into work, staying busy, keeping a routine, having somewhere to be where no one knew what was going on, and that provided some genuine relief, at least temporarily. But distracting had a harder edge for some men. Drinking, casual hookups, channeling sadness into anger. These were ways of numbing something that felt too intense to face directly. Some guys recognized in hindsight that they were doing something that really wasn't coping. It was a way of holding it together until they were ready to actually deal with it at a later time. And expressing. Eventually, most men in the study did open up, but carefully and on their own terms. They were deliberate about who they talked to and when, choosing people they trusted rather than unburdening themselves to anyone who would listen. What mattered most wasn't just having someone to talk to, it was the quality of the conversation. Men needed someone who could genuinely engage with what they were feeling, rather than offer a quick reassurance or solutions. Interestingly, a number of men in the study found it easier to open up to women than other men, finding that women were more likely to sit with emotion rather than to try and fix it. For others, talking to a professional was finally what provided some important relief, a space to be honest without fear of judgment. For the men in this study, recovery started when the emotional intensity began to settle and they could start making choices about what they needed rather than just surviving the day. Many of the guys started turning their attention back to themselves, not in a self-centered way, but in a genuine, this is what I need to heal kind of way. And this looked different for everyone. Getting back to exercise, reconnecting with interests they'd let slide, spending time with people who knew them as an individual rather than part of a couple. The common thread was rebuilding a sense of self that belonged to them. The social side of recovery really mattered too. The guys reported being deliberate about who they spent time with. They moved toward people who actually engaged with how they were doing and moved away from advice to just get back out there and find someone new as quickly as possible. Interestingly, across this study, almost every man described being told by friends to push through it and get back out there rather than sit with what they were feeling. That advice came up a lot, and the research is pretty clear on it. Jumping straight back into dating isn't recovery. The guys in this study who were genuinely recovering knew the difference and trusted that instinct. Again, talking helped. Finding someone, whether that's a friend, a family member, or a professional, who would actually sit with what they were feeling rather than trying to fix it or minimize it. A number of guys in the study said that talking to a counselor or a psychologist was what finally gave them some sense of relief. Something that struck me about this research is how many of the men who came through their breakup described it, with time and distance, as a meaningful experience. Not just as something that happened to them, but as something not easy, but meaningful. The anger, guilt, and sadness gradually gave way to something more settled, and for some men, even a sense of gratitude. One participant described coming out of his breakup feeling like a completely different person, more confident and less afraid. That kind of growth can't be rushed, but the research suggests it's available to most men given time and the right support. And if you're in the middle of grieving a relationship now or in the early stages, I know this feels hard to imagine. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong or it won't come, but I hope something you'll be able to discover yourself with the right support to get there. For students of Trobe University, student wellbeing has a range of different counselling services, including generalist counselling and also specialist services, including men's wellbeing counselling and LGBTIQ plus counselling as well. If you're not a student, a chat with your GP can be a really good first step. To everyone else, friends, families, workplaces, universities, we all have a role to play here too, to focus on men's health and well-being, especially at difficult times like the end of a relationship. So many guys really want to show up for their mates and sometimes are not sure how. The researchers note real opportunities in peer support, specifically equipping male friends with the skills to support their mates. Building those skills matter, both for the guy going through it and the friends around him. In the meantime, if you have a friend, a colleague, or a family member going through a breakup, check in and give him the space to be heard. Links are in the comment section to help with this important conversation. The more we can shift the norm around men supporting each other emotionally, the wider the net of support becomes. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other. This has been Men's Wellbeing Conversations. If anything in today's episode has brought something up for you, or you're currently in crisis, please don't sit with this alone. You can contact Lifeline anytime on 131114. If you're a La Trobe University student, the University After Hours Crisis Line is available to you when the Wellbeing Services are closed. Call 1300 146 307. There's also a list of current supports in the comments section. The content of this podcast is based on published research and professional experience in men's wellbeing. It does not reflect or disclose information from any past or present client of the Wellbeing Service at La Trobe University or of the host of this podcast. Any resemblance to an individual's circumstances is coincidental. The podcast is for general educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional psychological support.